Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. Let's discuss Ubisoft, shall we? The whole Ubisoft situation. It's a doozy. It really is. I was reading through some comments on one of my recent videos. The whole PlayStation 4 cannot handle 1080p Assassin's Creed Unity 1. Did pretty well. And the comment basically said that, well, do you like Ubisoft? It's pretty obvious you don't like Ubisoft. And it wasn't like a negative comment or anything like that. The person meant it in kind of a whimsical way, but it did get some upvotes, and it kind of got me thinking, do I like, really, Ubisoft? Do I dislike them? And the answer is no, I don't dislike Ubisoft. I don't know them as a group, but I do think that they have done a lot of stupid stuff in the past year or so. It's got to be the last 12 months. That's not to say that they are the only ones. If we were to take a look at Electronic Arts, you know what? I'm not even going to go through the whole list of companies that have done stupid stuff, because the video will be 20 minutes long before I even finish the list. But let's just be honest. Electronic Arts, how many times have they won the Worst Company in America award for consumers? And the thing is, they're not the only ones. As much as I disagree with some of the statements Ubisoft have made, they're not trying to out and out censor, like, for example, Warner Brothers have. I mean, the whole Warner Brothers fiasco when it comes to Shadow of Mordor, that's really bad. And I think from a consumer standpoint, that's considerably worse than any of the stuff Ubisoft have done, just simply because of the censoring of the reviews. If you don't know about that, you can Google it yourselves. I don't want to spend too much of the video on that, but it's absolutely quite ridiculous, the situation Ubisoft have gone into, and I don't genuinely know how it's happened, because it seems that it's a situation that they've managed to get themselves into in short order. I mean, they've just made one mistake after the other mistake after the other mistake. One of the obvious examples we could use is the whole women in Assassin's Creed being the protagonist, playable character. And it's really weird, because the excuse they've given regarding the whole it's too difficult to animate them. First of all, they are using animations on other women in the game, so yeah. But okay, obviously, if you're a playable character, you've got to have additional animations, and you've got to have the voice acting and stuff like that. But it's not like the voice acting for the males is free. It's not like, you know, all of this stuff is free with the male characters, and yes, it's easier to reuse the skeletons and all that stuff, but my point being, it's still costing you money. And then you had a whole bunch of indie developers, and even AAA developers, that took them to school with this. They said, well, you know what, we're making these little tiny indie games, and we can do it. And yes, of course, indie games are cheaper to produce, but in terms of ratio, look how much money Ubisoft have got, and then look at the budgets of a smaller indie developer, and then you can see where I'm coming from. The point being that any of the females that I've spoken to who are gamers, they've said the following. Well, paraphrasing, but, you know, I wouldn't have been upset if they had just come out, meaning Ubisoft, and said, it's not our vision to have a female in the game. Done. But when you start coming out with excuses about the whole animation, it just makes you sound bad. Even if it's the truth, it just makes you sound bad. That's it. And if it is the truth and that's where you want to go, give reasons as to why. Give a breakdown. You can't just have a tiny little statement. You know why? Because everyone is just going to run with that statement, including ourselves, and you have no context behind it because you've not provided context behind it. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out statements like that without context are going to get you in trouble. Then there's the whole, well, Watch Dogs situation. Oh dear. It's really bit them in the ass, Watch Dogs. There's several reasons behind that. Despite the fact that they are fairly adamant over the no visual downgrades thing, it's factually incorrect, because they've basically, well, criticise themselves, because initially, when E3 trailer was released, we all were extremely excited about it. We were like, this is what next generation is going to be, blah 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 blah. And then the whole full game, you know, we see the real gameplay, and people on NeoGAF, people on various forums, you know what they're going to say. But dude, this looks a bit off. You know, you can't have suddenly something that looks like, yeah, better than last generation, but certainly not as good as the E3 trailer. It doesn't take a genius to do, you know, to see the difference. And then Ubisoft tried to defend it and said there's no visual downgrades. Okay, well, there was a lot of arguments on the internet and blah blah blah. Eventually the game gets released, and of course they found that there are hidden PC settings. Lo and behold, within just a few days of someone modding, and by the way, there's been multiple iterations of this mod, and to say mod is extremely generous. It's like me saying to you, well, I've modded my Windows because I've changed the logo. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the developer of this mod, but it's not really a mod. Even they themselves say it's more just alterations of config files. In other words, they've not created new textures, they've not adjusted the lighting or anything like that. They've basically just implemented modes that have already been there. In other words, cranked up the quality of the graphics. And Ubisoft say, well, you know, as they're shifting on the seat at this point, yeah, well, those modes are broken. And of course, we as gamers are saying, but dude, we're playing it now. And they're like, yeah, but it causes frame rate issues. I've run frame rate tests. Tons of people have run frame rate tests. Even YouTubers that don't even really specialise in tech stuff, like Total Biscuit, covered this. And guess what? No issues. No frame rate drops. And the game looks better. It just does. It's not questionable. It's not anything else. It's just objective. It's not even subjective. It just looks better than not modding it or changing the config files. Now, the reason this becomes more controversial is because, well, I've gone on about this a couple of times, but recently there's been a lot of talk over a group of Ubisoft employees. There was a programmer, an online programmer, and a couple of others who went to a school. Now, it's heavily implied, and you can Google this yourselves, although I did cover it on RGT, it's heavily implied that they actually were saying that Watch Dogs was heavily altered due to outside pressure. And it's kind of funny because they actually are even implicating that Ubisoft have ties with Sony and they have ties with Microsoft, which we already knew anyway. And the frame rate, there was a lot of pressure on them from Microsoft to basically put artificial frame rates on games for PC. In other words, so that the titles would be forced to run at 30 FPS or designed to run at 30 FPS. So, if that's true, that sucks. Now, probably the biggest one that has caused a huge amount of rage is the Assassin's Creed Unity parity situation. There are others that Ubisoft have done, but this is probably the one that's pissed so many people off the most. Because I don't genuinely know, from a standpoint of someone who does digital marketing myself, I just genuinely do not understand how a company can flip-flop so many different times, so many different statements, and they're like, it's okay. Now, I understand that Ubisoft are a huge company, and so sometimes you can get a bit of miscommunication, but this is not a slight miscommunication as in like, oh sorry, we said the 15th when the game's coming out and actually it meant to be the 21st. This is ridiculous. And you get in statements like, well, 30 FPS is more cinematic, and the next day, literally in the next 1 to 2 days, when internet blows up on them, then they say, well, actually no, 60 FPS is better in 1080p. Then, of course, you get the whole parity arguments. Now, I'm not going to go into the technology stuff side of things on this video because I don't really want to do that. I've discussed that heavily in previous videos, and I will be doing more on the whole PlayStation 4 API thing. Some people have asked about the whole DX11 on PS4 and so on. But the problem is now, remember those GDC documents, the ones that I did analysis for? The GDC Europe 2014. Well, it turns out that I was kind of right on some of this stuff, and other developers, like big developers, have apparently started to chime in as well. They're not basing off my research as far as I know, but they've been looking at the slides, and they've been basically saying that Ubisoft have not been doing things efficiently on the GPU. And so now, Ubisoft are getting called out again. Now, once again, the problem is, it's not the fact that the whole parity situation exists. It's not the fact that the frame rate situation exists. It's that people don't understand it, and Ubisoft are once again giving us quotes without context. Like this supposed leaked quote, which was the basis of 900p on the PS4, here's why. There was no context behind it. There were massive swathes of information that we were just scratching our heads with, and just like, well, why is this? You can't say that the CPU is holding back the resolution when you're not giving us reasons, when, as far as most people under the sun are aware, it's going to be the GPU that's causing this. The only situation that I could think of is that you're offloading so much stuff from the CPU that the GPU on the PS4 is literally unable to keep up. But in which case, why is it the Xbox One is even managing to run at 900p anyway, when it's only got 150 megahertz difference between it and the PS4 CPU? It just doesn't make sense. And when the GPU is about 50% faster as well. In fact, in one of their tests at GDC, using compute, they were actually showing it to be almost twice the speed. It's ridiculous. So, the question must be raised, could you tell us the reasons as to this? And once again, the silence. So it's like you can't put a GDC document which seemingly but completely and utterly goes against the grain of what you're telling us now as to the reasons of parity. Especially when we're hearing developers behind the scenes who are going to these schools, and once again, obviously this doesn't necessarily implicate the whole Ubisoft, but it's certainly what we kind of suspected anyway, and these people are saying, well, yeah, there's hardware limitations everywhere, and if you're reading between the lines, they're saying that they want parity. Console developers want parity, so once again, Ubisoft are in the crosshairs. I think the reason that people are pissed this generation is because we were led to believe so much stuff before the damn machines were released. We had so much hope, we had so much expectation, and this was fueled by E3 trailers and promises from both Sony and Microsoft of 1080p Nirvana. Now, of course, some people, including myself, were a little bit suspicious of this, given the specs of the machine, but Ubisoft are not the only ones that have been caught in these unfortunate situations. Remember the whole Killzone Shadowfall situation regarding its resolution. It's not 1080p. Yes, it is 1080p. Yes, it's not 1080p. And this, of course, was all over the temporal reprojection. I did cover that quite substantially back in the 6th of March, actually, 2014, of course. And that was, of course, where the developers were using part of the previous frame to basically draw the next frame, and so on and so on. And people absolutely took Guerrilla and, of course, Sony to town with that, because they'd said the title is going to be running natively at 1080p all the way through for all modes, and it just wasn't the case. And I actually think they should have gotten hit a lot harder than what they did. But in fact, I believe there was a lawsuit that was possibly going to be filed regarding that. I don't know how or if that's ever come through, where someone was actually doing, I believe it was a class action suit. Anyway, the point being that Sony as well have done these little porky pies, which is quite ridiculous. But let's just be honest here. I mean, really bluntly honest. One of the problems I've got with gaming, and even Destiny has this issue, is one of the reasons I'm not playing it anymore. We had these really grandiose ideas of Destiny, and it's very, very easy to say, well, it's because you've been gaming a long time, but no, because some games just do live up to the hype, and they do live up to the expectation. Aliens Isolation, in my opinion, lived up to what I was expecting. Maybe not the best game in the world, but it was pretty damn good. Mass Effect 3, okay, the ending kind of sucked, well, the original ending, but it was an amazing game. I don't think Dragon Age Inquisition, I'm not getting the feeling that that's going to disappoint me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do have a good feeling about that title. And then, of course, you've got other games which have been extremely strong as well. The last Tomb Raider, I think, was absolutely an amazing title. I'd encourage you to pick it up and try it out. I thought it was really good. You've got titles like Dark Souls 2. Once again, amazing. You've got Skyrim, especially on the PC, which is extremely moddable and will give you so many hours of entertainment. Literally, if you are bedridden, you are going to be entertained. However, this is just, at the moment, the nature of gaming. And what pisses me off with titles like Assassin's Creed, like Destiny, maybe not so much Destiny, because I don't think, to be honest, I feel that Bungie, for the most part, were pretty open and honest about the game. They even gave an open beta. And I didn't particularly think that open beta was that amazing, but I bought the game anyway, because obviously I had to test it and I was curious about the whole phenomenon. Which I imagine many of you were as well. And I do feel that they were, for the most part, fairly open about what the game would and would not entail. But the problem is, most of these titles now are packaged with the idea of season passes, with the idea of possibly microtransactions. And it's like, what concerns me about this whole situation is it's destroying consumer confidence. It's not filtering into the mainstream yet. Like, if you were to go down to the average store, the average person, they're not going to probably still know about the resolution stuff as much. Or maybe they might know that it runs at 900p, but they're not going to know the ins and outs of it. Some may, but most people will not. The problem is, though, consumer confidence is starting to get pretty shot from what I'm reading on forums and from speaking to friends and viewers as well. You can tell that, you know, it's getting worse, consumer confidence in these companies. And that's not a good state for the market. Jim Sterling's talked about this quite a lot, that you basically just keep pissing on the player base. You keep taking money from them, and you can't keep asking money up front. It's like, imagine if I was to say to you guys, hey, I'm going to be having a drive, and I want £20 or $20 from all of you. And you're going to say to me, well, what's it for? Well, I'm going to give you the names of what we're going to be doing. And you say, yeah, but that's nice, but what's it going to be? It's going to be some video content. Yeah, and it's going to be really great. Could you give us more specifics? Like, what's it going to be used for? Is it going to be used for equipment? Is it going to be used for, like, going to the location to shoot? No. I'm not going to tell you that stuff yet. Just give me the $20 and I promise you you'll like it. You would unsubscribe, and I wouldn't bloody blame you. I'd probably click the button for you if I ever said that to you. You know, fair enough, if you're going to do a donation drive, whatever, fine. But at least ask the person what the hell, you know, tell the person what it's for, be clear, concise, and so on and so on. It's the same with DLC. A lot of the DLC that's being sold, it's just crap. And you can't continue to do that with customers, especially after the initial game is a bloody disappointment. And that's assuming that we PC gamers actually get a good bloody version of it. Like, one of the classic examples, and this is one of those things that just pisses me off more, like The Evil Within. I'm still doing a frame rate test and stuff on that. It's just because I've been ridiculously sick over the last few days. I'm actually feeling better now. But I also had some work, but I will be finishing that over this week. And it's actually quite lucky, fortuitous even, that the comparison was delayed, because they've just, some dude has released a patch for The Evil Within, and guess what? It allows you to have full screen gameplay, not the stupid FOV fix that Bethesda have included. It was done by a dude in just a couple of days, and I'm not taking anything away from the guy. I'm really not. I'm not having a go at him. I'm not saying he sucks. I'm not saying that I appreciate his work. I think he's a really great guy for doing this. But it shouldn't be that someone could fix an issue like that Bethesda have been silent on for weeks, when us as gamers have said, excuse me, Does it run at 60 FPS on PC? Silence. What about the FOV thing? Silence. And then eventually they tell us there's a command, and then, yeah, but that just zooms you in. Congratulations, well done you. My point being, and I know that sounds really harsh and really ungrateful and stuff like that, but it's really hard not to be when you've just plonked down £35 for a version of a game. And yes, I understand that some people are going to say, well, the game was originally intended for that aspect ratio, but you know what? The real reason behind that, and you can easily tell just by looking at the bloody frame rate, particularly when you go outside on the console versions, is because if it had to render that extra 30%, they would not be able to soldier, the systems would not physically be able to render the game at a decent frame rate. It's that simple. And why not just give us the option on PC? It just doesn't make any sense, apart from, of course, the old reasons that we all know and love. I know I sound a little bit of a miserable bastard in this video, and I don't mean to be, but this is kind of the point that I was trying to make for a long time. Ubisoft are guilty of this stuff, but a lot of developers are. And I understand that, you know, for the most part, not all developers are like this. I don't feel that they are. I would even go as far as to say that companies like Electronic Arts, with what they've said recently regarding Battlefield, with delaying a couple of their games and stuff like that, I would go as far as to say that I think they've not completely and utterly changed their ways, but they're getting better. They're not perfect. They've still got some problems with microtransactions in DLC. So I'm not exactly saying they're customer first buddies. And obviously some of the reasons they've done this is because people like yourselves most likely have blasted them on the forums, or they've said something and they're winning that wonderful award that they love to win. That wonderful Worst Company in America award. So my point being that, you know, I don't hate any of these companies. I really don't. I don't know them. I don't know them outside of, you know, interviews or whatever. Fine. But I do think some of the decisions they have made, be it because of outside pressures, for example, parity clauses or whatever, or because of lack of time or budget or bug testing or whatever the reason, it's just kind of how it is. And it wouldn't even be so bad if on all versions at this point we weren't pushed with these pre-order things every single time. And I've got to say, if I were a consumer rather than a critic, and I don't really know if I consider myself a critic, I'd consider myself to be something, I don't know. Pain in the ass, hopefully, would be one of the criteria. I don't know if I'd pre-order much stuff. I really don't. I think I'd pre-order the odd thing. I'd probably pre-order the new Dragon Age, for example, because I have some faith in it, just judging from what the battles are. I'm not saying that I'd be right to have the faith in it, but I'd probably take the risk on it. But I certainly wouldn't pre-order a lot of stuff, because you're basically providing money to a company. You're basically putting down hard-earned cash. Now, one reason I will say that I do respect Origin a little, for first-party titles, is you do have a certain time limit where you can get your money back. So I would say, in that respect, I do prefer Origin for first-party titles for Electronic Arts, because you can get your cash back if you're like, you know what, this game's screwed up, man, this is just terrible, it doesn't run on my system, whatever reason, you can ask for your money back, and I respect that. Anyway, I think you know most of this stuff now about the whole pre-order situation. As I said, as consumers, we just have to be mindful. I would say, don't be disrespectful to the companies on Twitter, don't swear at them, you know, don't do any of that stuff, but just be really bluntly honest and say, look, I'm not going to have this pre-order, I'm not going to be doing this if you're going to continue to mess me about. Just be totally blunt, you know, and demand answers. We're not, to be honest, here's the thing, we're not demanding that they provide their source code. All we're doing, in some situations, is asking them, look, this is not a good explanation as to the reason you've done this. Could you provide more information, please? Done. And if they can't do that, you know, give us the reasons why you can't do that. Just saying. Anyway, I've been really waffly in this video, but it's actually good because I can speak now. My voice is burning after every 3 words. Literally, with the videos that I've been producing the last, like, couple of days ago, it was literally, I was pausing. You might have even been able to tell. I was literally pausing every, like, 30 seconds to blow my nose. It sucked. I'm not 100%, but I'm getting there. I might actually be able to go to the sodding gym soon. I'm actually really missing it. I haven't been in like a week. I'm like basically crumbling at the seams because I really want to go. But anyway, it's not good to go to the gym if you've had the flu. It really isn't. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care and bye for now.